Hi folks, this is Karim Raouf from IT Visualizer channel. We will continue our lab, the Matrix Labs, the video number 54. We have been discussing in the previous video the following. I'm still working on the Purple Knight Active Directory Security Assessment tool, which is a free tool to assess your Active Directory security situation. We have been discussing the report generated by this tool, and we are currently working with the group of tests called account security, and we have stopped the last time at the point or the test which is called recent privilege account creation activity. If we see the description of the test, it looks for any users and groups that were created within the last months, especially privileged users or privileged groups. And how he know, or how the test know that these are privileged or important groups or users, by looking at the admin count attribute. If it is set to 1, then this is a privilege account or a privilege a group. And we all know that the privilege account or the privilege group is protected by the admin SD holder admin SD holder object or admin SD holder process. Okay, so it's looking for that. And why this is or why we are looking at the objects created within the last month, especially the privilege objects, because this could be a normal operation or it could be a malicious act. Maybe the hacker is creating an account or a privilege account, then he uses it and then delete it back. So we need to check or monitor the creation of privileged users and groups, which are in most environments it's tightly controlled and audited, or it is already logged in the event viewer. So this is like a refreshment, or this is indicator provide a fast method to create a list of new privilege accounts where admin count equal 1 for investigation and review. So this is like a quick review, I think, for the event logs, okay, and creating a list of the newly created privilege accounts or objects. So this is a quick review and a quick list of what was created concerning privilege objects like users and groups. If it is a normal act, then you can bypass the test, or if it is an unnormal act or a malicious act, then you can go and see when it was done and what happened exactly using these accounts. So this is very simple test, and you don't need to further illustrate more. Okay, we go to the next test, which is unprivileged accounts with admin count 1. So we all know if you change the membership of a user from a privileged group to a non-privileged group, the admin count should be reset. So for example, I put Karim in domain admins group, then the user Karim, his admin count attribute should be 1. If I removed him from this group and put him in a normal group, let's see, for example, accounting group, then the admin count should be 0 or should be reset. This doesn't happen in some way, or some situations this does not happen, and he says, or what I have seen from the AI tools, saying that this process doesn't happen automatically. You need to make this manually. So let's see here what he's talking about. The indicator looks for any users and groups that have been under the control of SDProp, or this is the process for checking the permissions on privileged objects like users and groups, and seeing if they are in line with the admin SD holder template. Okay, if it is good, then it will pass. If it is not good, it will reset the permissions on the privileged groups or objects based on what is in the admin SD holder template, but are no longer members of privileged groups and should not be considered privileged. So this is normally happen when you change the membership of a privileged user to a non-privileged group. So this is what happened. You should revise this or revise the admin count, so you can make a report to get the admin count of the users and groups in your domain, and see if the users having admin count 1 are really members of privileged groups. If this is the situation, then you are fine. If they are not and they are changed to a non-privileged group and the admin count still 1, so we need to reset the admin count attribute. Let's see also the lie code of compromise. The most common scenario for this behavior, if a user is moved from a privileged group to a non-privileged one and their admin count is not reset. While this is beginning, it may cause issues for security controls that monitor privileged users and reduce the overall hygiene of the environment. In rare cases, this might also be an evidence of an attacker that attempt to cover their tracks and remove a user they used for compromisation. So what happened here? He's saying that you need to check the admin count of the users that are moved from a privileged group to an unprivileged group. So let's see, for example, Kareem admin count is still 1 even though I have moved him to a accounting group, for example. This will make problems because every time I try to give him permissions or assign permissions with him, this will be reset by the SD prop process, okay, which still considering him a domain admin even though I have moved him from this group. So if I try, for example, to put or give, for example, this user read permissions, this will be reset by the SD prop because the domain admin have more privileges than read. He should have full control. Anyway, so this is a problem, and this also can be an attacker changing. For example, he have put his backdoor account in domain admins, and after finishing the process, he moved him to a non-privileged group. So this also can be a trace or tracks of an attacker. This should be monitored. Okay, so this is very, very simple, and we have seen a lot of security recommendations to review the admin count attribute for Active Directory objects. So we can go further and see the next test, which is a very, very important one. Something called users and computer with non-default primary group ID. Okay, so any user created an Active Directory, he has a default primary group. So for example, every user created in the Active Directory, he should be automatically a member of a group called domain users. This is his primary group. For example, if a computer joined the domain, he is automatically a member of domain computers. If a domain controller promoted in a domain, he will be a member of the domain controllers group. So this is the primary groups of the users and computers. These are by default. So here this test is looking for users and groups with non-default primary group. So if you see a user that doesn't have a primary group or a default primary group, as we have oscillated, for example, maybe we see a user that is not a member of the domain users. Okay, this is an issue we need to focus on because this can be a track of, or this be an evidence of evidence of hacking. Let's see what does this say. The indicator returns a list of users and computers whose primary group IDs are not the default for domain users and computers. Users created in the domain will have a default PGID of 513 domain users. So every user or computer has a default primary group. This have a name and have a number. So when I say 513, then I am referring to the domain users group. If I'm talking about 514, this is domain guest. If I am referring to 515, then I am referring to domain computer. So the hacker, what he can do, he can change the default primary group of a user or a group, okay, from one number to another. So let's, for example, take a situation where we have a user that is a member of domain users and its primary ID is 513. So basically, or what the hacker can do, he can change this from 513 to what? To 512, which is the domain admin's group ID. So by changing the ID of the primary group of the user, this is like adding him to the group or to be a member of a group. So this is very, very critical, and this is an indirect way to add a user to a group without actually doing that, just by changing the primary group ID. So let's see here, or let's continue. We have a default PGID of 513 domain users or 514 domain guests, while computers are 515 domain computers, 516 domain controllers, or 521 read-only domain controllers. The primary group ID is not automatically changed when a user is moved to a different group. To say, a user moved into domain admins will not be assigned 512. So for example, if I promoted a user from 513, a normal user, to 512, a domain admin, his primary group ID will not be changed. He will still have the number of 513. So this will not reflect his primary group ID. He has already been moved from one group to another. So this is one thing, or this is will be an issue, okay? Because what will happen, he will still be dealt with, or he will still be recognized by the system that he is a normal user, okay? But let me see first. This fact can be used to hide users with privileges to systems that rely on PGID. So what will happen here, okay, when I change a user from one group to another? For example, Karim was promoted from domain users to domain admins. The system will still see him as a normal user, but he is having currently the privilege of a domain admin. So this is like covering his deceiving the system. So the system still sees Karim in as a normal domain user, but he is currently a domain admin and having privileges of a domain admin. So this can be a situation where a hacker can do the same. He can take a user, change his primary group ID, okay, and give it another one, or another privilege primary group ID, and then he can work with it and the system will recognize him as a normal user. This fact can be used to hide users with privileges to systems that rely on PGID, while hiding the user from queries that rely on enumerating the membership attribute without the PGID. So most of the, even if you are using scripts to take or to extract the membership of groups from the Active Directory, they rely on the ID, not the name of the group. Okay, so he's relying on, or he is not fetching, or he is not scanning the groups. He is saying the PGID of the user. If it is 512, then he is a member. He is not actually checking the group membership. He is just seeing the PGID of the user. If it is a certain number, then he is a member of this group. Okay, so while some systems do that, or some scripts do that, so you should not rely on this method to see the membership of a user, okay, while hiding the users from queries that rely on enumerating the membership attribute without the PGID. Additionally, group objects membership attribute will not list the user's object with PGID of those groups. Anyway, so this is a way to cover the footsteps of a certain user. So let's see likelihood of compromise. Modifying the primary ID is a stealthy way for an attacker to escalate privileges without triggering membership attribute auditing for group membership changes. So by this statement, that means when I change the primary group ID of a user from one ID to another, then this is not considered changing a membership. This act is recorded by the event viewer, but doing this by changing the group ID of a user, this is not recorded. So for example, let's take a situation when what I have done, I have removed Karim from the domain users group and put him in the domain admins group by the normal process, changing him or moving him from the group and adding him to another group. This is recorded. Another way is to leave Karim in the domain users group, but changing his primary ID from 513 to 512. This is like taking him from one group to another, but it is not recorded. This is not recorded, or it's not triggering, or it's not recorded by the event viewer. So this is a very, very stealthy way to change the permissions of a user, or the role of the user. Let's see Perplexity, when I asked him to explain this topic, what it will say. So let's see here the answer of Perplexity and see the answer of Claude and the answer of ChatGPT. Let's first read it loudly.
In Active Directory AD, each user and computer account is assigned a primary group ID, PGID, which designates their default group membership. By default, this ID is set to 513, corresponding to the domain users group. However, there are instances where users or computers may have non-default PGIDs, which can raise security concerns. Understanding primary group IDs. The PGID is a relic from the POSIX standard, primarily used for compatibility with Unix systems. It plays a crucial role in determining access to resources, especially in environments that integrate Unix and Windows systems. The PGID is typically set during account creation and is essential for managing permissions and ownership of files and directories in certain applications. Default values. Domain users. RID 513, default for user accounts. Domain admins. RID 512 can be assigned for POSIX compatibility. Enterprise admins. RID 519, also for POSIX scenarios. Risks of non-default PGIDs. Changing a user or computer's PGID to a non-default value can lead to several security vulnerabilities. Privilege escalation. Attackers can exploit PGID changes to gain unauthorized access to sensitive resources. For example, if a standard user's PGID is changed to 512, they may be perceived as a domain admin, granting them elevated privileges without actual group membership. Evasion of detection. By manipulating the PGID, attackers can obscure their true group memberships, making it difficult for security teams to detect unauthorized access or malicious activities. This tactic can be particularly stealthy, as it may not generate logs or alerts that traditional monitoring systems would catch. Monitoring and mitigation strategies. To protect against the risks associated with non-default PGIDs, organizations should implement proactive monitoring and auditing practices. Regular audits. Conduct routine checks of user and computer accounts to identify any unauthorized changes to PGIDs. This can help detect potential security breaches early. Real-time monitoring tools. Utilize advanced security solutions that can alert administrators to changes in PGIDs as they occur. Tools like Semperis Directory Services Protector can provide real-time insights and alerts on suspicious activities. Principle of least privilege. Ensure that users only have the minimum necessary access rights. This reduces the potential impact of any unauthorized changes to PGIDs. Educate users. Training staff on the importance of security practices, including recognizing social engineering tactics, can help mitigate risks associated with unauthorized access. Conclusion. Active Directory's primary group ID is a critical component of user and computer account management. While it serves essential functions in resource access and management, improper handling or unauthorized changes to PGIDs can lead to significant security vulnerabilities. Organizations must prioritize monitoring and auditing to safeguard their AD environments against potential exploits related to non-default primary group IDs.
So this is a very, very good answer. Simple though. So let's see the answer of Claude. I give him the description of the test and the section apply code of compromise. Let's see how this is reflected in a real world scenario and see how this could affect our Active Directory security status. Just wait for a moment. Let's see. Read it loudly.
Methods. Copy. Retry. Certainly, I'd be happy to explain this using a real-world example in the context of Active Directory. Let's break it down. Imagine you're the IT administrator for a company called Matrix Internal. You're responsible for managing the company's Active Directory, which is like a big digital phone book and security system for all the employees and computers in your organization. Default setup. When you create a new user account for an employee, say John Smith, Active Directory automatically assigns him to the domain users group with a primary group ID, PGID, of 513. Similarly, when you add a new computer to the network, it gets assigned to the domain computers group with a PGID of 515. The hidden privilege escalation. Now, let's say a malicious actor, Eve, gains access to your Active Directory. Instead of adding herself to the domain admins group, which would be easily noticeable, she changes her PGID to 512, the PGID for domain admins. The stealth factor. If you run a query to list all members of the domain admins group, Eve won't show up because she's not actually a member of that group. She just has the same PGID. However, some systems in Matrix internal might grant privileges based on the PGID rather than group membership. These systems would treat Eve as if she were a domain admin. Auditing blind spot. Your security team at Matrix Internal might have set up auditing to alert them whenever someone is added to the domain admins group. But since Eve changed her PGID instead of joining the group, this action wouldn't trigger those alerts. Real-world impact. Eve could now potentially access sensitive systems or data within Matrix Internal without setting off the usual alarm bells. She might be able to create backdoors, exfiltrate data, or cause other damage while flying under the radar. Detection. To catch this kind of sneaky behavior, Matrix Internal's IT security team would need to specifically look for users with non-standard PGIDs. They might create a script or use a security tool to regularly check for and flag any user accounts where the PGID doesn't match their apparent group membership. This scenario illustrates why it's important for organizations to monitor not just group memberships, but also PGIDs to maintain a secure Active Directory environment. It's a subtle way that attackers can gain elevated privileges while evading common detection methods.
This is a very, very good answer, and I think more, or it is good, it is better than the answer of Perplexity. Okay, Perplexity, maybe it had given us some explanation, but not that good. I think the answer of Claude is very, very good. Let's see the answer of ChatGPT 01 concerning the same topic and see what will be the answer. So I think here he is giving us a good example, but let's read it loudly.
Sure, let's explore this concept with a real-world example in an Active Directory AD environment for the domain matrix.internal. Understanding primary group IDs, PGIDs. In Active Directory, every user and computer account has a primary group ID. This ID associates the account with a specific group by default. The standard PGIDs are domain users, default for new user accounts, domain guests, 515, domain computers, default for computer accounts, domain controllers, read-only one redomain controllers, RODC. Hash scenario in Matrix. Imagine Alice Smith is an employee at Matrix.internal. When her user account is created, it's automatically assigned the default PGID of Thinka, domain users. Promotion and group membership change. Alice gets promoted to the IT department and needs administrative privileges. An administrator adds her to the IT admins group, which has elevated permissions. However, her PGID remains 5 because changing group memberships doesn't automatically update the PGID. How attackers exploit PGIDs. An attacker gains access to the network and wants to escalate privileges without being detected. 1. Modifying the PGID. The attacker changes Alice's PGID from 5 domain users to 512, which corresponds to domain admins. Even though 512 isn't listed in the default PGIDs, it's commonly associated with domain admins in some environments. 2. Avoiding detection. Changing the PGID doesn't trigger standard security alerts or logs that would typically occur when adding a user to a high-privilege group. 3. Bypassing group membership checks. When administrators audit group memberships by checking the member attribute of groups, Alice doesn't appear under domain admins because her membership is implied through the PGID, not explicitly listed. 4. Gaining unauthorized access. Systems or applications that rely on PGID for permission checks now grant Alice administrative access, allowing the attacker to perform high-privilege operations stealthily. Real-world implications. Hidden privileges. Users with modified PGIDs can have elevated access without appearing in standard group membership lists. Stealthy escalation. Attackers can escalate privileges without triggering usual security mechanisms that monitor group membership changes. Incomplete audits. Security teams relying solely on group member attributes may miss accounts with elevated privileges via PGID modifications. Hack preventative measures in Matrix.internal. 1. Monitor PGID changes. Implement alerts for changes to PGIDs, especially when accounts are assigned PGIDs associated with high-privilege groups. 2. Comprehensive auditing. Use tools and scripts that check both the member attribute and PGIDs when auditing group memberships. 3. Restrict PGID modification rights. Limit the ability to change PGIDs to a small number of trusted administrators. 4. Regular reviews. Periodically review all accounts with non-default PGIDs to ensure they are authorized. Conclusion. In the Matrix.internal domain, understanding and monitoring PGIDs is crucial for security. Attackers can exploit PGID modifications to gain unauthorized access while avoiding detection through standard auditing practices. By implementing comprehensive monitoring and restricting who can change PGIDs, organizations can mitigate this stealthy method of privilege escalation.
So a good answer, but I think Claude's answer is better. If we go and ask Perplexity, how can I detect if someone has alerted a user primary group ID in Active Directory? So it's saying here that we should enable auditing for account management. So this is one way we can enable account management auditing option to record such an activity. He's giving you the steps to do that, and the account management IDs or event IDs are here listed for 1728. For example, a user has been added to a security group, but this is adding him to a security group, not changing the PGID. So this is, I think, this is not correct, or even I think maybe this is maybe correct. You need to test this answer and see if it's correct or not. But here he is giving us the events for changing or adding a user to a group, removing a user to a group from a group, local group. So this is for the Active Directory groups and the local groups, and some tools like SMIRS Directory Service Protector. This is SMIRS. This is the company that have created Purple Knight tool. So they have some software to record or to monitor such activity. Lipedia Active Directory Auditor. So you need software for auditing or monitoring Active Directory. I think Manage Engine also from as a company have a software like that. Regular audits. So it's basically depend upon event viewer or activating the audit option for account management and using third-party tools. Okay, so this is something. Another question, are there any native tools in Windows that can help monitor primary group IDs changing? Here he's saying that normally the event viewer is one of them. Okay, PowerShell. So he's giving us a command to get the primary group ID for a user. This is a manual thing. Maybe you can create a script to get the primary ID for a list of users or a list of groups, maybe. And you can run it as a scheduled task, maybe. So you can do this on a regular basis by creating a scheduled task in the Windows operating system. But this is a manual process, and maybe it is not that efficient. Or he's saying again, auditing or enable auditing feature. So these are all native built-in Windows tools to monitor the primary group ID change. DCDiag, I don't know DCDiag if I think this is not correct, because what does DCDiag do? He's saying while it does not directly monitor primary group ID changes, can be a part of a broader strategy to ensure domain controls are functioning correctly, which is crucial for maintaining. But anyway, I don't see this relevant to use the DCDiag tool. Anyway, so this is uh, one thing. Okay, so let's see the next test, which is related to this test. He's saying users and computer without readable PGID. So we are testing if there is any users and computers without a primary ID, or their primary ID is not, or primary group ID is not readable. I cannot read it. Okay, so this is one thing. The primary group ID is not set, or the primary group ID is not read. I cannot read it. Okay, so let's see here. What does he say? This indicator finds user and computers for whom it can't read the PGID. This may be due to the default permission of read access have been removed. Maybe a hacker have done this, which could indicate an attempt to hide the user in combination with the removal of the membership attribute. Okay, so this is like a hacker not giving you a way to know the primary group of a user or a computer. Okay, and he's saying can be used for hiding users in certain groups. Okay, and this is not protected by the admin SD holder folder. So this is one thing. Let's go and see Perplexity when I give him this topic to explain. So here is giving you a way to get users with or you cannot read their primary ID. So this command will give you users or groups without a primary ID, or the users that you, or computers or groups that you cannot read their primary ID. So this is a PowerShell to read something like that. So let me read the answer of Perplexity concerning this topic. Just a moment.
Answer. Detecting users and computers with non-readable primary group IDs. To detect users and computers that have a non-readable primary group ID, PGID, in Active Directory, you can use PowerShell cmdlets and monitor for specific indicators. PowerShell approach. Use the getAdUser cmdlet with a filter to find users with an unreadable PGID. PowerShell. User filter, not primary group ID, like asterisk. This command will return any user accounts that have a PGID that cannot be read. While there may be legitimate reasons for a non-readable PGID, it could also indicate an attempt to hide group membership using the PGID attribute. Monitoring indicators. One reliable indicator of potential abuse is to monitor for access control entries, ACEs, that deny read access to the PGID attribute. If an attacker sets a deny ACE on this property, it will prevent tools from reading the PGID value. However, monitoring for these ACEs can be challenging without the right tools. Some advanced AD security solutions, like Semperis Directory Services Protector, DSP, include built-in indicators that specifically monitor for users and computers with unreadable PGIDs. DSP can alert administrators in real time when this configuration is detected, allowing for prompt investigation and remediation. Mitigating risks. To mitigate the risks associated with non-readable PGIDs and potential abuse, consider implementing a multi-layered approach. Regularly audit AD for unexpected changes to user and computer accounts, including modifications to the PGID attribute. Monitor for suspicious activities and alert on anomalies using tools like Semperis DSP that can detect unreadable PGIDs. Enforce the principle of least privilege to limit the potential impact of any unauthorized changes. Educate IT staff and users about social engineering tactics that may be used to enable PGID attacks. By proactively monitoring for unreadable PGIDs and implementing robust security practices, organizations can significantly reduce the risk of attackers exploiting this vulnerability to hide their activities and escalate privileges in Active Directory.
So this is the answer of Perplexity, which seems to be good. But let's go and read the answer of Claude. Okay.
Start new chat. Certainly, I'll explain this concept using a real-world example in the context of Active Directory for the fictional company Matrix Internal. Let's break it down. Normal Active Directory setup. In a typical Active Directory environment at Matrix Internal, every user and computer object has a primary group ID, PGID. This PGID is an attribute that's usually readable by anyone who has basic access to the directory. For example, the IT help desk staff can usually see this information for any user or computer they're trying to assist. The scenario. Imagine there's an IT administrator named Alice at Matrix Internal. She notices something odd. There are a few user accounts where she can't read the PGID. This is unusual because normally she should be able to see this information for all accounts. What could this mean? There are two main possibilities. A. There's a legitimate reason for restricting access to this information. B. Someone is trying to hide these accounts for malicious purposes. The malicious case. Let's consider the second scenario. A malicious actor, let's call him Bob, has gained access to Matrix Internal's Active Directory. He wants to create a backdoor account that won't be easily noticed. Here's what he might do. Create a new account or modify an existing one. Remove the default read permissions for the PGID attribute of this account. Also remove or modify the member of attribute, which shows which groups the account belongs to. Why is this stealthy? Most IT tools and scripts at Matrix Internal probably rely on being able to read the PGID and member of attributes to determine a user's permissions and group memberships. By making these unreadable, Bob has effectively made his account invisible to many standard auditing and management tools. Real-world impact. Alice or any other IT staff at Matrix Internal might run regular audits to check for unusual account configurations or permissions. Their standard tools might simply skip over or fail to properly report on Bob's hidden account because they can't read its PGID. This could allow Bob's account to persist undetected, potentially with high-level permissions, for an extended period. Non-malicious scenarios. It's worth noting that there could be legitimate reasons for restricting access to PGID information. For example, Matrix Internal might have some highly sensitive service accounts where they've intentionally restricted access to this information. However, this would typically be documented and known to the IT security team. Detection and prevention. To catch this kind of activity, Matrix Internal should implement more sophisticated auditing that specifically looks for accounts where standard attributes like PGID are unreadable. They might also implement stricter controls on who can modify these critical attributes in the first place. Regular reviews of account permissions, especially focusing on accounts with non-standard configurations, would be crucial. The SD-Prop protected mention. Some high-privileged groups in Active Directory are protected by a mechanism called SD-Prop, Security Descriptor Propagator. This automatically resets permissions on these protected objects to a secure default state. The indicator is noting that this hiding technique works better on groups not protected by SD-Prop, as SD-Prop would eventually undo any permission changes on protected groups. This scenario illustrates a subtle but potentially dangerous way that an attacker could hide malicious accounts within Active Directory. It underscores the importance of comprehensive and sophisticated monitoring and auditing practices, going beyond just checking group memberships to look at the underlying permissions and attributes of Active Directory objects. Copy. Retry. Krone. Who are the users that have the ability to modify PGIDs? To answer your question about who can modify primary group IDs, PGIDs, in an Active Directory environment, Let's break this down. Default permissions. By default, the ability to modify PGIDs is highly restricted. The following groups and users typically have this permission. A domain admins B, enterprise admins. In a multi-domain forest C, the built-in administrator account. Delegated permissions. In some organizations, this permission might be delegated to other groups or users, such as a help desk or IT support staff B, HR personnel for user account management C, dedicated identity management teams. How permissions are granted. The ability to modify PGIDs is controlled by the right primary group ID permission on user and computer objects in Active Directory. This permission is part of the more general write all properties permission. Checking permissions. To see who has this permission in your environment, you could use the Active Directory Users and Computers tool. Enable advanced features in the View menu. Right-click on an OU or container. Go to Properties. Look for entries with Write All Properties permission. Use PowerShell. PowerShell. Copy. Get ACL AD. CN equals users. DC equals matrix. DC equals internal, select object expand property access, where object $_ to Active Directory rights. Match write property, and $_ dot object type. EQ 000000000-00000-00000 or $_ dot object type. EQ BF967. Best practices. Limit this permission to as few accounts as possible. Regularly audit who has this permission. Use the principle of least privilege. Consider implementing a Privileged Access Management (PAM) solution for sensitive operations like PGID changes. Potential risks. Users with this permission could potentially hide privileged accounts by changing their PGID. Escalate privileges by assigning a higher privileged PGID. Cause disruptions by incorrectly modifying PGIDs. Remember, the exact list of users with this permission can vary based on your organization's specific Active Directory configuration. It's crucial to regularly audit these permissions to ensure they align with your security policies. Copy. Retry. How to change the PGIDs. Certainly, I can explain how to change primary group IDs, PGIDs in Active Directory. However, it's important to note that modifying PGIDs should be done cautiously, as incorrect changes can lead to access issues or security vulnerabilities. Here are several methods to change PGIDs in Active Directory. Using Active Directory Users and Computers, ADUCA, open ADUCB, find the user or computer object C. Right-click and select Properties D. Go to the Member of tab E, select the desired primary group, and click Set Primary Group F. Click OK to apply the changes. Using PowerShell, you can use the Set AD object delete. Here's an example. PowerShell. Copy. Set AD object identity CN equals John Doe. OU equals users. DC equals matrix. DC equals internal. Replace a primary group ID equals 512. In this example, 512 is the PGID for the domain admins group. Replace with the appropriate PGID for your needs. Using ADSI Edit. A. Open ADSI Edit B. Connect to the default naming context C. Navigate to the user or computer object D. Right-click and select Properties E. Find the primary group ID attribute F. Modify the value to the desired PGG. Click Apply, then OK. Using LDP.exe. Open LDP.exeb. Connect and bind to your domain C. Navigate to the user or computer object D. Right-click and choose Modify E. Enter primary group ID as the attribute F. Enter the new PGID as the value G. Click Enter, and then run. Using a script. Here's a simple PowerShell function to change the PGID. PowerShell. Copy. Function set user primary group perm. String $userdn. In $new PGID, $user equals ADSI. LDAP. // $userdn. $user.space.invoke set. Primary group ID. $new PGID. $user.setInfo. Hashtag usage example. Set user primary group user in CN equals John Doe. OU equals users. DC equals matrix. DC equals internal. New PGID 512. Important notes. Always verify you have the correct PGID before making changes. Ensure the user is a member of the group corresponding to the new PGID. Be aware that changing PGIDs can affect user permissions and access. It's recommended to document any PGID changes for audit purposes. Consider testing in a non-production environment first. Remember, changing PGIDs is a sensitive operation that should only be performed by authorized administrators with a clear understanding of the implications. Improper changes can lead to security issues or disrupt user access.
So we have here a broad view about the PGID, how to change it, who is responsible or who can change the PGID, how to monitor the PGID changing or the changing of the PGID. So a lot of info actually introduced by Claude and very, very illustrated and simple answers. So let's see what will be the answer of ChatGPT 01 concerning the same topic. So we'll go there and ask it the same question like this one and give it a try. You can see here is a bug always. I cannot know why this happened, so I have to make a refresh. Let's see how much time we have. Okay, we have 46 minutes. So now we can go and give it the same prompt and see what will be the answer. Okay, this is the answer. Let's see, or let's read it loudly.
Certainly. Let's explore this scenario within the context of an Active Directory AD domain called matrix.internal. Understanding the issue. In Active Directory, each user and computer object has several attributes that define its properties and group memberships. Two crucial attributes are Primary Group ID, PGID, indicates the primary group to which a user or computer belongs. Member of lists all the groups that a user or computer is a member of. By default, these attributes are readable by authenticated users. If the ability to read these attributes is removed, it could be an attempt to hide the user or computer from standard queries and audits. Scenario in matrix.internal. Background is a user in the matrix.internal domain. Her user account is JDoe, with a default PGID of 513, domain users. She is a member of several groups, including Marketing Team and Project Alpha. Hash, malicious activity. An attacker gains administrative privileges in the matrix.internal domain.
Sorry guys, we will read it from the beginning again.
Certainly. Let's explore this scenario within the context of an Active Directory AD domain called matrix.internal. Understanding the issue. In Active Directory, each user and computer object has several attributes that define its properties and group memberships. Two crucial attributes are Primary Group ID, PGID, indicates the primary group to which a user or computer belongs. Member of lists all the groups that a user or computer is a member of. By default, these attributes are readable by authenticated users. If the ability to read these attributes is removed, it could be an attempt to hide the user or computer from standard queries and audits. Scenario in matrix.internal. Background is a user in the matrix.internal domain. Her user account is JDoe, with a default PGID of 513, domain users. She is a member of several groups, including Marketing Team and Project Alpha. Hash, malicious activity. An attacker gains administrative privileges in the matrix.internal domain and wants to create a hidden user with elevated permissions. 1. Creating a hidden user. The attacker creates a new user account, stealth.admin. They add stealth.admin to high-privilege groups like domain admins. 2. Altering attribute permissions. The attacker modifies the security descriptors on stealth.admin's PGID and member of attributes. They remove the default read permissions, preventing other users, including administrators, from reading these attributes. Impact. Hidden from queries. When administrators run queries to list members of domain admins or search for users with elevated privileges, stealth.admin does not appear. Standard tools and scripts that rely on reading the PGID or member of attributes cannot detect stealth.admin. Avoiding detection. Security audits and monitoring systems fail to flag the unauthorized user because the key attributes are unreadable. Which have real-world implications. Stealthy privilege escalation. Attackers can maintain elevated access without being detected during routine audits. Hidden users can perform malicious activities such as accessing sensitive data or creating backdoor accounts. Incomplete audits. Security teams may have a false sense of security, believing that all privileged accounts are accounted for. Critical security measures might be bypassed due to incomplete information. Vulnerability in non-SDPROP protected groups. Groups not protected by the Security Descriptor Propagator, SDPROP, are more susceptible because permission changes are not automatically corrected. Attackers can exploit this to persistently hide accounts. Detection and prevention in matrix.internal. Indicators of compromise. Unreadable attributes. Users or computers for whom the PGID and member of attributes cannot be read. Accounts that seem to have missing or inaccessible information. Unusual permission changes. Modifications to default security descriptors on user or group objects. Removal of read permissions from attributes that are typically accessible. Preventative measures. 1. Regular auditing. Implement tools that detect and report on accounts with unreadable PGID or member of attributes. Schedule frequent audits to ensure all user and computer objects have default permissions intact. 2. Monitor permission changes. Enable advanced auditing to track changes to Active Directory object permissions. Set up alerts for modifications to security descriptors, especially on critical attributes. 3. Leverage SDPROP. Use the Security Descriptor Propagator to protect critical groups. SDPROP ensures that any unauthorized changes to permissions are reverted to their default state. 4. Restrict administrative privileges. Limit the number of users who have permissions to modify Active Directory objects and their attributes. Implement the principle of least privilege to reduce the risk of misuse. 5. Educate administrators. Train IT staff to recognize signs of attribute manipulation. Encourage a security-first mindset to promptly address suspicious activities. Conclusion. In the matrix.internal Active Directory environment, the inability to read the PGID and member of attributes for certain users and computers is a significant security concern. This situation often indicates the default permissions have been altered to hide malicious accounts within privileged groups. By understanding this threat and implementing robust auditing, monitoring, and permission controls, organizations can detect and prevent attackers from using this stealthy method to escalate privileges and hide unauthorized access. Regular reviews and adherence to best practices in Active Directory management are essential to maintain a secure and transparent environment. Remember, always ensure that default permissions on critical Active Directory attributes remain intact, and be vigilant for any signs of unauthorized changes. Regular audits and proactive security measures are key to safeguarding your organization's network.
I still see Claude 3.5 Sonnet answer is good, but it is not that organized as ChatGPT o1. I think if it is a little bit organized, it will overcome or supersede ChatGPT o1. So let's go and ask it a couple of questions. ChatGPT o1, who are the users that have the ability to change PGID? If tell him copy and ask it this question. So we can see here that the one who can modify PGID are domain administrators and uh, enterprise administrators, local administrators on the domain controller, account operators. I think this is new. Okay, I think this is new. Account operators, maybe this should be tested. Users with delegated permissions, we know that it was said before. Schema administrators, this is indirectly, so it's saying that this is not a direct way. While they don't typically modify PGID directly, they have the highest level of permissions, could alter permissions to grant PGID modification. Okay, so you can change the schema to allow PGID changing. Okay, I think maybe this answer is better than Claude. Default permissions, so he's adding additional info. Standard users cannot modify, but I think they can read. Limit to their own user accounts, cannot modify PGID. Standard users can typically modify certain personal attributes. Okay, so I think here they can read, maybe. I don't think so. So they can modify their own PGID. Cannot modify the PGID, but can modify other attributes like email address, phone book, or so. I don't think so. Computer accounts, permissions managed by themselves and computer accounts cannot modify their PGID. Security implementations, okay, implementations unauthorized, so and so. Preventive maintenance measures, sorry, domain admins, account operators, enterprise. Okay, anyway, so he's saying that we have these groups. It's very, very organized. I hope Claude 3.5 have the same output to be more organized. Domain admins, enterprise admins, administrators, account operators, users with delegated permissions to modify PGID. So I think the answer is more organized. If we go and see the next question, how to change the PGID, copy and see what will be the answer of Claude 01. So we can see a lot of ways to do that. Some are through PowerShell, some are through normal tools like Active Directory users and computers. Let's go and see what will be the answer. Here is saying that simply you can go to Active Directory users and computers, press the Windows button plus R button, type dsa.msc and press enter. This will go to administrative tools, and then you can open Active Directory users and computers, select, or the view, in the view option select advanced features, and then you can go to the user that you need to check its PGID attribute. Okay, click on properties for this user, go to the attribute editor tab, and then see advanced feature, and then find the primary group ID. You can go and then edit it manually. Okay, so this is one thing. Ensure that the PGID matches the read of an existing group in the domain, so you cannot put a number that does not exist. Okay, so PGID, okay, this is a way. The primary group must be a group that the user is already a member of. Changing it does not automatically add the user to the new group, but if they are not already a member, I think this is not. Changing it does not automatically add the user to the new group if they are not already a member. I don't think so, because this is a stealthy way. This is not correct, because this can indeed put him in the group, but in indirect way. Okay, so we add the user to the group, but if you are not already a member of, so this is not correct. You can use a PowerShell. You can open PowerShell, import Active Directory module or commands, then this command get the user identity and then the primary ID, group ID attribute, and select the object. This will, you can with this command view the currently primary group ID for the user called John Doe, And then there is another command, okay, for getting the group, the ID of, for example, if you need to get the domain's admin group ID, or primary, or the domain admin's primary, the ID of the group of the domain admins, you can type this command. So this is it. It can give you the number, and then set the user. This is the put the user and then the primary ID. So this is basically very, very simple commands to follow. So here is the full command, or the full script. Step 1, get the rid of the domain admins to get the ID of the group. Okay, this is the command. Then step 2, after getting the ID of the domain admins group, you can tell or change the primary group ID of the user to the primary ID, or the ID of the domain admins group. Okay, verify the change. You can get the user ID or primary group ID after changing it, just to make sure that it is already changed. Okay, so he's saying some considerations. Group membership requirement: the user must be a member of the group corresponding to the PGID. If not, unexpected behavior. No, I think this is not correct. Security implication: change that can affect permissions. Unauthorized changes can lead to security vulnerabilities. Yes, this is correct. Replication delay: changes may take time to replicate this across domain controllers. Okay, this is correct. Audit: document any changes. So I think this will not be documented, or it will not be recorded maybe. So best practice: limit who can change PGID, monitor changes, educate administrators, use with caution. Some errors may be encountered. The primary group token is invalid if the primary ID number is not correct. Cause: the user is not a member of the group corresponding to the PGID. I think we need to test this kind of errors. Okay, user permission not updated. Okay, I think because the user doesn't have the permission to change the PGID. Conclusion: changing the primary ID is a task that should be performed with care. Okay, remember so and so. So this is a very, very good answer. I think if there is anything we can add, or this is the last thing. Okay, so we will stop at this test. So the next, or the upcoming video, we will check the user accounts with all passwords. So we will stop at this test and discuss it in the upcoming video. Hope this video is informative for you all, and thank you all for viewing. Thank you so much.